How will children so constantly but artificially stimulated ever learn to think, imagine, create, or just be still? The short answer is that they won't. Bill Gates himself said that devices have a lousy record in the classroom. Mark Zuckerberg went to a tech-free school in Boston. Steve Jobs didn't let his own children use iPads. Students who use computers very frequently at school do a lot worse in most learning outcomes. Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to see you all, lovely to be here. I'm going to start with a slender anecdote, totally true, from about 4 weeks ago. It was early evening, and I was on a packed 19 bus in London, standing over a young man and a young woman. They were sitting beside each other, both gazing at their smartphones. Nothing unusual about this, of course. They were both attractive, smartly dressed, professional-looking, around the same age. Willfully invading their privacy, I subtly angled myself to see what they were up to on their phones. They were each on dating apps, reading the profiles of men and women who presented as extremely similar to the two of them. Completely true. Our bus reached Piccadilly Circus, and both happened to alight at this stop. I watched the two of them as they walked away from each other, one towards Shaftesbury Avenue and the other towards St James's. I don't need to labour the point of what I witnessed with this couple never to be. They were side by side, both seeking companionship or love, but they didn't even register each other's existence. Social media is described as a great connecting force, and it can be a wonderful thing. But the digital destruction of childhood is a crisis we must face. I visited schools up and down the country, and too often I saw children distracted in classrooms, yet silent in playgrounds. Screens were taking their attention away from their teachers during lessons and away from each other during break time. I also observed children in general becoming a different species. The raucous exuberance of youth was being replaced with an anxious, irritable insularity, which was disturbing to see. From a personal point of view, I know that if I'd had devices in and out of the classroom, I would have bombed academically. I'd have been constantly distracted, thrilled by all the garbage available online. I wouldn't have read any books, and I'd have got up to goodness knows what on my various machines. Our household landline was quite derailing enough. Looking back, I cherish the very analogue form of education that I received and the very human connection with my beloved teachers. It's been one of the greatest gifts of my life, and I want all children to be able to focus, to acquire knowledge, and to achieve their maximum potential. I think that should be every civilized society's aim. But the evidence shows that we have already put this gravely at risk. We left the doors to our children's classrooms, their bedrooms, and their minds wide open to the world. Health professionals for safer screens recently issued guidance that 11 to 17-year-olds should have no more than 1 to 2 hours screen time per day. This includes everything: iPads, school laptops, smartphones. It's all just screen time to the brain. And yet, children aged 8 to 18 are on average spending 7.5 hours per day on screens outside of school hours. Out and about, the reality is starkly visible. The number of toddlers subdued by screens on public transport when they'd be perfectly happy looking at the strangers around them, the dogs on leads, the opening and closing doors, is to my mind tragic. This unthinking crossover from the analogue to the digital is resulting in heavily impaired speech, cognitive development, and emotional regulation. How will children so constantly but artificially stimulated ever learn to think, imagine, create, or just be still? The short answer is that they won't. Excessive consumption of screen-based technologies is damaging developing brains in ways too seismic yet to fully comprehend. From the damage to focus, to self-esteem, to deep thinking, to the ability to read books, to be patient, to sleep well, to interact healthily in real life, to think of others as opposed to one's own brand, to pure opportunity cost. The list is relentless. And these harms are at the more minor end of the spectrum. The enhanced facilitation of knife crime, the enticement to radicalization and terrorism, and the repulsively violent porn. These horrors are globally recognized, yet still readily available on children's phones. Some lawmakers around the world are taking action to limit social media for under 16s. Bravo to Australia for taking the first stand. The Karolinska Institute in Sweden recently published research concluding that there's clear scientific evidence that tools impair rather than enhance learning. Sweden has taken note and been the first country to kick tech out of the classroom, reinvesting in books, paper and pens. They had the courage to admit that EdTech was a failed experiment. Bill Gates himself said that devices have a lousy record in the classroom. Mark Zuckerberg went to a tech-free school in Boston. Steve Jobs didn't let his own children use iPads. UNESCO says moderation should be the key word relating to classroom tech use. The OECD found that most EdTech has not delivered the academic benefits once promised, and that students who use computers very frequently at school do a lot worse in most learning outcomes. Global test scores in maths, science and reading are plummeting. I say no way to all of this. No way for the reasons above, and no way from a learning point of view. Text has now been clinically proven to be more profoundly absorbed from a page in a book than it is from a screen. And handwriting installs learned information into the brain much more effectively than cutting, pasting, swiping and typing. Reading books and handwriting work is a deeper, not to mention a calmer way to learn. Screens manage to be both caffeinating and numbing, where books are decompressing and absorbing. Reading and handwriting are also harder in a good way. Friction and struggle are a necessary part of the learning process. Make everything too easy and it's like feeding 10-year-olds puree when they need to chew. Hearteningly, members of the teaching profession are pushing back. David James, deputy head of a leading independent school, says, "The most powerful learning tool in the classroom is an excellent teacher, and the most effective way to ensure children progress is to teach them to read and write effectively. A screen can be a distraction, an obstacle to learning, in a way in which a book, paper and pen never are." Certainly, the schools I visited where tech is used in moderation as opposed to trigger-happy abandon are far more successful in terms of student attainment and well-being. To build on this movement, we need both a parental revolution and government cooperation. Firstly, we must employ tech as our slave rather than our master. Our use of it has to be intentional, specific and moderate. Secondly, we need transparency about how much is being spent on EdTech compared with what's being spent on teachers. We must drastically reduce the presence of screens and technology in our classrooms, and smartphones must be permanently excluded from the school day, ideally from children's lives altogether. We should empower parents with a right to opt out of classroom tech in favour of paper and pen, and we should inspire generations of children to love, honour and cherish books. To conclude, if we want to produce a generation of responsible citizens, we must flip the current argument on its head. Rather than constantly having to prove that screen use is blighting childhood, we should ask simply, where is the evidence to prove that it's safe? If we take these brave steps, I believe we can veer away from catastrophe, return childhood to our young, and light the way to a hopeful future. Thank you.